You have to really ponder a profession that you are running into what everyone else is running away from. And it was incredibly freeing. I just let go of fear. And for me, it's about that whole connection, you know, and it's not always with the camera, it's humanity. I am very excited to be here. Thank you for coming to see me. This is actually my second passport, and I obtained my wanderlust in utero. My mom was a flight attendant, British flight attendant for Pan Am, and Dad was a research chemist, and they met on a flight in somewhere overseas, and he fell in love with her legs, she fell in love with his. He was a rugby player for Cambridge. I don't know if it was the best basis of a marriage, but it gave them reason to emigrate to the States. They wanted me to have a foothold in both continents to sort of instigate my love of travel, and it worked. But it was really Mr. Lee, my high school English teacher, that took me aside and really taught me how to use my first SLR camera. And I can remember the first time he said the word photojournalist and that you could travel the world taking pictures. And I was 15 years old, and I said, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to be. And I went on to study photojournalism, and I was very drawn to Asia. For whatever reason, I had this sort of deep-seated spirituality. I was really affected by Gandhi. I wanted to go to India specifically, and I saved my money to go travel when I got out of college. I lived with Bedouins in the Sinai in Egypt. I worked on a kibbutz in Israel. I hitchhiked into Beirut when they bombed the American embassy, got into all kinds of trouble there, got held in a prison camp. So I came back to the States, and now this is, after really kind of traveling and backpacking for 3 years, but photographing the whole time. And my mom is now living in San Diego, and I went to this newspaper, and I just said, can you look at my work? What do you think? Do you think I have a chance at doing this for a job? And to my surprise, they hired me on the spot. And one day I was in the back of the newspaper, back when we were doing dark rooms, and I was flipping through a magazine, and I saw these beautiful doe-eyed children in this magazine. And I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm 24, I'm so old. I'm, gonna die at this newspaper. Will I ever get to India? And I called the photographer and I told him how much I loved his work. And he said, well, I'm a UNICEF photographer. If you're ever in New York, come by and show me your portfolio. So I bought a plane ticket. I went out to New York the very next week. I showed him what I was working on and shooting, and he said, this is great. Do you want to go shoot an assignment in Nepal? And I paused 3 seconds for dignity, and I said, yes, I would love to go to Nepal. And I quit my job and just thought, let's just see what happens. And I went for this 3-week assignment, and I did not leave Nepal for more than 4 years. And I just felt like I'd come home. So here I am in Nepal, and I was covering a lot of the political situation there because they, back in the 90s, it was a very big political hotbed, and they were, about to overthrow the government. This is when they actually did overthrow the government. I was photographing a lot of the demonstrations and the skirmishes, and this was really heavy stuff. I just had seen a lot of people get shot. And I've just been tear gassed. And you have to really ponder a profession that you are running into what everyone else is running away from. So I also was given a really great assignment for UNICEF, photographing for the Convention for the Rights of the Child. And so that was a lot of my work there, was photographing for all these aid and humanitarian organizations, photographing all aspects of children. And this is a little girl that my friend Olga is amazing. She has almost single-handedly stamped out girls being sold into bonded labor in Nepal. And what they do is they sell these girls in the market for sex trafficking. And now there's this program where they give a piglet to the families so that they will sell the piglet at the end of the year instead of the girl child, which is a sad statement about what a girl child is worth in Nepal. During this time I lived in Nepal, I found there's 120,000 Tibetan refugees living throughout India, Nepal on these 57 different Tibetan settlements. And this is Tibetan New Year in Nepal, and they're throwing zampa, flour, up in the air to celebrate the New Year in Kathmandu. And this is the same, what they call a stupa, where some of Buddha's remains are supposedly buried in the middle of this. And it's the all-seeing eyes of Buddha. And a lama has died, so they're lighting 100,000 butter lamps, small little butter lamps, all around the stupa. And for the New Year, they tie new prayer flags, and these prayer flags are very indicative of the Himalayas. They're prayers that are printed on these flags, and the prayers, which symbolize earth, wind, fire, the elements of the earth, blow to the wind, and they leave them up till they're all gone. So I went around all over India and Nepal photographing these Tibetans in exile. I was very interested in the diaspora. And there was sort of a slow but steady infiltration of the Chinese coming into Tibet throughout the 1940s, which culminated on March 10th of 1959 when the Dalai Lama actually fled. And immediately, 85,000 to 100,000 Tibetans all followed him. And there's been a trail continuously coming over. Now there's, as I said, over 120,000 in exile. And he lives in this place called Dharamsala, India, which is in the north. And these are little Tibetan girls dressed up for Losar. They still very much keep their culture in these exile settlements. And this is a creche. These are little children, babies, Tibetan babies. And as many of you probably know, in Tibetan Buddhism, they believe in reincarnation. Now, I was going all over photographing these different high lamas and all aspects of their life, and I went to go photograph Kalu Rinpoche, who was this very old lama living in Darjeeling, India, in the north. I got up there, it was pouring rain, and I waited, and his caretaker came out and said, "I'm really sorry. Kalu Rinpoche," which means lama, "is too ill to see you." And I left feeling disappointed because I felt that not only would I not get to photograph him, but I'd never meet him, and sure enough, he died 3 months later. This is years later. I'm now in Dharamsala, India, and I hear that they have found the reincarnation of this Kalu Rinpoche. So I thought, okay, let's go meet him. So I go to this boy's room. His mother greets me at the door, and he's playing Game Boy, this little video game, on his bed because he might be a high lama, but he's still a child. And he looked up and he saw me and he said, "I remember you. You came to see me. It was pouring rain. My caretaker was making momos, these steamed dumplings," which he was. "I was too ill to see you then, but I'll see you now." And I was like, okay, interesting. So it's maybe something to this reincarnation thing. When the Chinese came in, about 6,500 Tibetan Buddhist monasteries were destroyed. And they felt that by killing they thought that they would kill the heart of Tibet by killing the Buddhism that is really their sort of crux of their life. And this was Lhasa, and this Chokpori Hill was very important to them in that this is like where the Tibetan School of Medicine was in Lhasa in Tibet. And the Chinese came in and completely destroyed it and put a TV antenna there. And these Tibetans came back and made this mural and carved out this little area where they still circumambulate, which means they still walk around it, spinning their prayer wheels. And here is one of the monasteries that's actually rebuilt in Tibet. Lhasa started becoming so taken by the Chinese that I started moving further and further afield and became very, over the years, more interested in the Tibetan nomads and how they were surviving. Here's a Tibetan nomad woman living in her yak hair tent. And this is a beautiful hill. It's just all these undulating hills covered with these prayer flags, these tall prayer flags, which blow to the wind. And here's a man with his little baby. I was just walking by, and his little baby peeked out. This was actually in the Geographic. This is actually the cover of my book, because I felt it was one of those photos that, as I'm taking it, and I wouldn't see this photo for 3 months because that's how long I was there, where you just feel like, oh my gosh, I have this photo. I mean, this is just so resonating, and it's such a beautiful feeling. And then I got the photo back, and to me, after all these years of working, with Tibetans, I just felt like she really encapsulated the sadness, yet the resiliency and the dignity of this culture and these people. And she's only about 5 years old, and besides the beautiful headdress, and so I'm just going to go through a few of these photos because I just love their headgear. I mean, I just find these people, and I, go through these very remote areas, and I've been taken with these, like this Frisbee hat, and, they just have this incredible sense of style that is becoming eradicated very quickly. Part of this culture will not last, I believe, for another generation, certainly two. And they wear these beautiful waterfall of amber, turquoise, coral. These are actually her cheeks, from the wind. There's no makeup on her. And this boy admits he has no idea what his hat says. But he liked wearing it. Earmuffs, rabbit earmuffs. So apart from the fact that this boy looks like he's just left the dentist, what's interesting about him is that he's actually Muslim. And even though the Tibetans are really, 99.9% Buddhist, it's really fascinating that there's actually a small contingency of Tibetan Muslims that when the Islamic traders came through Tibet, they intermarried. And now there's a few Muslims that, believe the Dalai Lama to be their political leader, but not their spiritual leader. And this woman, bless her heart, had no idea why I was taking her photo and what I found interesting. And she was just walking down the street carrying a bag of cement on her head. And I run out, and I'm like, do you sleep in that? So then one day I'm in this little town, and obviously I'm really into their dress and their headgear, and I see an orange hat, and I'm practically hyperventilating, and I believe it's probably made from that goat hair. And then I saw a few more, and they started looking like little Dr. Seuss characters, or human Q-tips. And then I get out, and there's like this whole valley of orange hat people at this, they're all congregated at this horse festival. So I was ecstatically happy. This is Laos, and I was in Laos working on the book on children around the world, this Faces of Hope book. And I just felt like my life was really where I wanted it to be. I just, every morning before I open my eyes, I think this is where I want to be, what I want to be doing. And how often do you get that in life, And it's so interesting because that's right when life throws you a curveball. I got up early in the morning. I photographed these monks and collecting alms, as they do, these Buddhist, Theravada Buddhist monks, and the people give them offerings for their food. And this almost became the last picture I ever took. I then went and jumped on a bus to go down from the north to the south, from Luang Prabang to Vientiane. And as you can see, it's rather rickety. I don't think you're really supposed to have plastic seats in the middle. Everyone seems to be gripping for a reason, because it's the most potholed road I've ever been on. But we were coming around a corner, and I've been on these buses a million times, and you're like, oh, that was so close. And we were coming around a corner. I looked up, and I thought, wow, that was close. And we just got slammed by this huge logging truck. And it was literally right where I was sitting. And it just sheared the whole bus in half. And I was pinned with this logging truck and this bus. And I was actually knocked unconscious. I was pulled off this burning bus by two men. The people around me were killed. And pulled to the side of the road. And I woke up and I had broken my back, my pelvis, all my ribs. My arm was nearly torn off. Most alarming is that I had collapsed lungs, so I really could not get a breath. And I had major internal injuries. And these villagers, it's a very remote jungle road, and these villagers brought me to their village, and this young man proceeded to sew up my arm with nothing more than a needle and thread. And huge chunks of glass and metal. And I later found out he was not a doctor. He wasn't even a nurse. He was just using needle and thread and staples. And, I'm out of my mind with pain. I knew that if I passed out, that I was never going to wake up, that I needed to not go into shock. So I'm grabbing this guy by the collar. We're in the Golden Triangle, for God's sake. Do you have any of that opium you're all smoking up here? And this guy didn't speak English. He handed me a washcloth. I'm like, no, that's not going to cut it. So, but, I got through that. And these villagers, bless their heart, did not leave me for the entire time. They just stayed with me. But as we got into 10 hours, it was really clear that I was not going to get out of this situation alive. And I couldn't get a breath. I could not breathe any longer. So I wrote a note to my family, and I told them how I died and where I died. And I wanted them to know that I didn't die alone and in fear, that I was feeling held. And that was a really remarkable experience for me, because I kind of never really knew that about myself, that I was really okay to die alone on a jungle road in Laos. And it was incredibly freeing. I just let go of fear. And I did feel truly held and feel like I absolutely had this near-death experience. And interestingly, though, it just wasn't my time. Right at that point, this guy comes up, this guy, Alan Guy. He just happened to be driving by. He was a British aid worker, and he said, I'm going to get you out of here. And he drove me, which he absolutely did not need to do, with his wife, Van. They drove me all the way to Thailand, which was 8 hours in the back of a pickup truck on the most potholed road ever. And here you can see I'm not in good shape. I actually flatlined 5 minutes later after they took this photo. And this is in Thailand in the hospital, and this is weeks later. My arm is trying to heal. But I was 3 weeks in intensive care in this hospital in Thailand. And I am the poster child for medevac insurance, because I did not have it. And it was $25,000 to get me home. Just a little side note for those of you who travel. But I was medevac back to the States, back to San Francisco, again, where I lived. And given a very grim prognosis that I was never going to walk properly again, it was pretty devastating news for someone that's an avid hiker, skier, kayaker, been to Everest Base Camp twice in Tibet and Nepal. And I lay staring at a ceiling on a morphine drip for many months. And then I just reached a point where I got to get off these drugs, and got off everything. And I remember this doctor coming in my room and saying, you better think about what you want to do with your life now, because you are never going to work as a photographer again. And I said, really? Because I plan on climbing Mount Kilimanjaro for my birthday next year. So they sent me to a psychiatrist saying I was in denial, seriously. And I just got rid of all those doctors and started all over. And I got a new physical therapist, and she still laughs to this day that she remembers me hobbling into her room saying, tell me what I can do, not what I can't do. I think I can get back to kayaking. Can you help me do that? And she's like, well, you're not quite there yet. But anyway, a year and a half afterwards, I was finally able to kayak Glacier Bay in Alaska, which was huge for me. I really got to a point where at least I can get back out in the great outdoors. And then it took me 2 years, but I made it to the top of Kilimanjaro. Yay. So thank you. I'd like to say it felt really good, but at the time it didn't. Thought I was going to throw up, but it did. It really did feel like I'd come back physically doing something like that. And I circumambulated Mount Kailash in Tibet, which the Tibetans believe to be the center of the universe. The holiest part of the world for Tibetans is this area in western Tibet. This is where I was on my way to go to when I got in my bus accident. And it really meant a lot to me, this was a number of years after the accident, to do this pilgrimage, because it was so symbolic of where I had gone and what I had gone through. And I thought, how interesting that you don't choose the pilgrimage, it chooses you. And what the Tibetans do is they prostrate, as this woman is doing, around this mountain, which is, touching their hands to their head, their mouth, their heart, and fully elongating themselves to go around this whole mountain, which can take days, weeks, or months. I did it in like 4 days because I did not prostrate. I walked. And it had a lot of meaning to me, and really thinking about how this accident had sort of changed my perspective on things. Not so much that it caused me to change my life, but it really confirmed for me that I was on the right path and what I wanted to continue doing. And that was to bring empathy and compassion, even more so in my work. So with this idea, I've done a lot of this, as you've seen, humanitarian work in the past, but this was covering the tsunami right after it happened in Sri Lanka. And more than 1,200 people were killed on this train. They were just merely going from one place to another at Christmas time. And the train was thrown from its tracks, and you still saw the wrapped Christmas presents and the children's shoes, and very, very sad. This is in Batacola. More than 6,000 people were killed just in the small town alone because the fencing that they had for the animals prohibited any of the people from being able to run by this huge wave of water that came. And so I photographed this woman who'd lost 3 of her children to the sea, and that was weeping really profoundly. And then she got up and she threw herself into the ocean to kill herself. And that's, when I put the cameras down and I threw my body on her. And I held her down until someone came and helped her. But, just the loss, the palpable devastation of seeing something like that. And this little girl, she's lost her parents. This was in a makeshift shelter. I was staying in the Turks and Caicos photographing when I got a call, how soon can you go to Haiti? And there's just been an earthquake. And so I was out photographing for a number of things. Well, one was a relief organization, and these were babies sleeping in a bucket. This is in a hospital, but you can really see the progressive prosthetics that these kids are going to need. And then you turn around and see moments like this, one of the workers with one of the children that had survived. And I find that incredibly touching, when you just see so much hardship in the world, and yet when it's brought together in humanity like that. And then more recently, this work that I've been doing in Burma. But I feel like a lot of these images are really sort of celebrating the spirit within all of us. It's what really bonds us as mankind as we sort of continue this journey, this pilgrimage in life. And, just how similar we are in so many ways and in what we're striving for. I'm very interested in what's happening with Burma and the refugees there, because they have a very militant government, and it's such a hot place, as an enticing place to travel right now. So a lot of tourists are going there, and it's important for us to look deeply at where's this money going and how is it being distributed in the country, these tourist dollars. So with my Faces of Hope organization, I've gone on to raise money to bring tents to Haiti, help children in rehabilitation after car accidents in the Middle East, send girls to school in India. I'm now working to get a mobile medical unit for these Burmese refugees in Thailand. This is in Phuket. And the interesting thing about this pocket of Burmese refugees is Phuket is actually the most heavily touristed island in the country. And so you have all these people sunbathing, and it's, packed in the hotels, and yet these Burmese are just living in absolute squalor. This woman, sadly, had saved up enough money to send her daughter back to Burma, and she drowned the first week that she got back. So she was just lighting these incense for her daughter when I met her. But I asked these refugees, I said, look at the squalor that they live in. I'm like, how can you live in this for $8, to earn $8 a day, working so hard on these fishing boats and in construction? And they said, because in our country, we only make $2. And so I just been working to try to get this particular area cleaned up for them. And so I partner with NGOs, and this is a little school that they started for the kids, the Burmese kids there, because they're not even given refugee status, so they don't even get schools and such. And then just ending on this note of circling back to covering the tsunami in Sri Lanka. And this is a man who's burying 5 of his family members, and ironically in the very sand that killed them. And he's reading from the Quran. And so I was taking some photos of this moment, because that's what I do as a photographer. And then I couldn't help myself as sort of a humanitarian, just as a person, just to walk over and hold his hand and just tell him, I'm so sorry that you've gone through this. And he said, please don't forget about us. And I thought, here we are, the 2 most unlikeliest of people, but that's why I do what I do, because I think it's important to not forget. So when he turned to me and said that, I acknowledged that I would not. And so I greatly appreciate this opportunity to share all of these stories with you. Thank you very much. Yeah.